At the start of the American Revolution, most people thought Charles Lee would be the greatest American general. He was certainly the most experienced professional soldier at the time. Charles Lee was born in Wales in 1731. He was the son of a British officer, and Charles was so sharp that by the time he was 14 years of age, he became an officer for the British Army. Charles Lee fought in the American Revolution and also during the French and Indian Wars. It was there that he met George Washington when they were both a part of the disastrous defeat at Fort Duquesne under General Braddock. That story I talk about in Volume 2 of these historical devotions. Charles Lee lived among the Mohawk Indians for a while with his Mohawk Indian wife, and while there, the Indians renamed Charles Lee to Boiling Water because of his hot temper. When the French and Indian War was over, Charles Lee went back to England to find more action. He found just what he needed when England raided Spain. After several years in England, Charles Lee returned to America. He decided to switch sides and fight in the American Revolution against England. Although Charles Lee knew more about war tactics and had experience, most of the American soldiers didn't like him very much. They said he was an odd person. They described him as skinny and ugly, unwashed, and foul-mouthed. He took dogs everywhere, and he seemed to prefer dogs over people. At the beginning of the American Revolution, George Washington was happy to have Charles Lee because of his experience. Washington soon lost respect for Charles Lee because of his behavior and disobedience towards him, the superior general. You see, General Lee wanted to be the supreme commander over the Continental Army, over George Washington. That's why he resisted orders from Washington to unite their troops to become a stronger fighting force. You see, Lee was looking for a chance to take over to be commander. Lee figured if he won more battles and Washington lost, Congress would make Lee the general. Well, Lee made two mistakes that showed exactly what stuff he was made of. One night, General Lee sent his troops into a field to camp. He decided he needed a break. He deserved it. So he went to Basking Ridge Tavern in New Jersey, and while he was in the tavern, enjoying a nice meal and falling asleep, the British stormed the tavern.
Get him, boys!
They caught Lee sleeping and carried him off in his bedroom slippers, even without his wig. That cost him 2 years in a British prison until the Americans could capture a British officer of the same rank and offer a trade. General Lee rejoined Washington, a bit more humbled. But when they disagreed about battle plans at Monmouth Courthouse, and General Lee ran from the field of battle in terror and in disobedience, he was fired by General Washington, and thus ended his career as a soldier. He died just after the war was over in total shame. The two mistakes that Charles Lee made, one was disobedience, and two, being caught off guard. Both are warnings found in the Bible. Christians, we can't afford to lay our armor down and fall asleep, because if we do, the enemy will come in like a flood and destroy us. Charles Lee should have stayed by his men. He wouldn't have been captured and put into prison. We need each other. Don't get off alone, thinking that you can handle things by yourself. You'll never make it. Find a good Christian friend and a church and stick to them. Chew on this verse, meditate on it, and think it over. Hebrews chapter 10:24 says, "And let us consider one another, to provoke one another to love and good works, not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but encouraging one another, and so much more, as you see the day of the Lord approaching." Yes, if you meditate on that verse and make that a part of your life, you'll never be caught off guard like Charles Lee was. You'll make it to the end.